Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Hello,
Hey,
hello.
long time no see.
Hello.
Hey, long time no see. Yes.
How you been? Nice to see your face.
Same thing.
Where are you? Where are you?
On my side, I'm in Italy right now. So how about you? Mexico?
I am in Mexico City.
Okay. Cool. Anyone else? Do you want to mention where you are?
Hello, everyone. I'm Moisés González from edX. I live in Venezuela. Nice to meet you all.
Oh,
Pleasure.
All right.
Hey
Who
there,
wants to
guys.
go next?
Hello, guys. How are you? I'm Gonzalo from edX team based on Mexico City as well. So nice to meet you. Hi, Lawrence. How are you?
I can see you out the window.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. I can see you.
Cool. Okay, about Keith, you want to try to go next?
Oh, sorry. Hey everyone, Keith, OpenCraft. Yeah, I'm from South Africa.
All right.
Gabor from OpenCraft and from my mother-in-law, actually Hungary.
Cool. Jenny, you want to say a word or two?
Guys, do you hear me well?
Yes. No. I
Yeah.
can hear you. Yeah. Yep. It's good.
Okay, nice to see you guys. I'm Johnny.
How are
from
you, Johnny?
edX. I'm right now in Colombia, in a small town, 2 hours away from Bogota.
Nice. Hello again, Felipe. You want to say a
Hello.
word? Nobody
Yeah.
knows you, so no.
Sure. Felipe Montoya, co-founder of edX. I've been in this discussion for quite a while now, sometimes on the receiving end, reading what you guys have been pushing and publishing, and relatively not so long ago, we started working in our library, and we'll speak about that in a little while. By the way, I should add, I'm happy that we're having this meeting.
Yes, it's good. And even just as an excuse to see everyone's face, actually, we should
Yeah,
try
totally.
to schedule it regularly.
Like a mini conference.
Yes, a little bit. I think Braden, Todd, you still haven't talked. Do you want to say just a few words who you are, where you are right now, what you want?
Sure, I can go. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late joining, but I'm Braden. I'm at OpenCraft, and I'm based in Canada. I helped kickstart our Kubernetes initiative at OpenCraft a while ago and came up with some of the original plans for it, but I'm not managing the project or anything these days.
All right, I think that's everyone. Did we raise your hand if we have forgotten you, but I think we got everyone. I mean, on my side, I don't really want to be really the organizer of this meeting. I think it was a good thing to be all here together, but I think also that like, if we collaborate, I think it has to be something where we fit in a bit from different angle and different things. So I don't have like a specific agenda. I know that on my side, what I'm interested in is to try to find like a common ground on which we could like just decide to work together and share the maintenance and the evolutions and etc. of what we do, because I think a lot of it is quite similar, at least in terms of the actual use. How to get there personally, I don't have a specific preference. I was hoping there would be like a clear technical choice that everyone likes that we would all gather behind, but it doesn't look like it's quite happening. So I'm wondering what can be the ways we'll actually choose a solution, even if that means we all don't exactly get what we want. But I'm also interested to hear what people think. What are your own goals? Like, what you're willing to do together? Like, yeah, what do you think?
Awesome. I'd like to maybe I can jump there and say that before the conference, I was like a big proponent of every provider doing its own private thing for hosting. And then Xavier convinced me of being more open in several different dimensions, but this was one of them. Starting there, I started looking at what we had proposed internally for edX, and I started trying to extract what I felt comfortable that we could share. And then it hit me that I was also the arbiter of, I think it was OEP 45 or something, that is the one that outlines that we need to have a reference install and that things need to work on that reference install. Ultimately, that reference install ended up being Tutor. And that is kind of what we have right now. But I don't always agree with what Tutor has in store for hosting. So I decided internally to try and do our separate things, not necessarily for the whole bits, because Tutor is a very remarkable library and it does its job very well, but because we as a provider of many sites did not agree with all the choices that Regis had made for the original Tutor. So we tried to extract from there. And that is what led us to writing our own library. Even after we analyzed the libraries made by Lawrence, the DevOps Cookie Cutter, and Groove made by OpenCraft. So we analyzed those two, and still we decided to get in the space of writing a new library, even though there were already two libraries out there. And I'd like to share with you guys something that I prepared for this meeting. It is relatively ugly, but everyone can join in that Miro board, and feel free to change it, alter it as you see fit. But this was my thought experiment after the conference when we left that meeting saying we should collaborate on something, and we were getting started into the tricky bits. I tried to map here in this diagram what is happening in the space from infrastructure provisioning to environment generation to maybe writing a Kubernetes manifesto to building images to actually doing the cluster operations and continuous cluster like changes and maintenance for the long term. And I tried to the best of my understanding to map the 4 different available tools: Tutor Pure, Cookie Cutter, Groove, and Drydock. And I would invite you guys to look at it from this perspective, and maybe you'll find a different answer than what I found. But what I saw was that the 2 available tools were focusing on the infrastructure provisioning part. Specifically, Groove was, Cookie Cutter was doing a lot of infrastructuring. And then Groove was doing a lot of infrastructuring, but also a lot of CI. The CI was the heavy bits of everything needs to run on CI. But when it came to actually managing the OpenEdX bit, the part that we shared the most, both libraries resorted to using Tutor, both in terms of KS18it or Tutor Quick Start as a non-interactive process. So for the last bit, both of those libraries trust what Tutor says. And it is not that I don't trust it, it's just that I don't share what Tutor decided, because it might have decided things that were too simple for some of my customers, or that were too scoped to, like, Tutor clearly states that its goal is to have like a reference install that works for the 80% of the installations out there. But customers that come to edX and are actually willing to pay for us hosting the thing are normally on the 20% that is not in what Tutor already supports. So that was the problem we were seeing. And that's why I tried to propose in a thread somewhere, I forgot where, but somewhere I tried to propose that we could collaborate more towards the right side of this diagram instead of the left side of this diagram, more in the what makes us common open edX providers instead of what makes us use different infrastructure provisioning. And that's what we created DryDoc, which I am not married with. We can decide that this is not the tool that we need to use, and we can build some of those concepts somewhere else. And it was just a proof of concept that we ended up using for some projects, and you can see that in the library. But that was a little bit the space that I wanted to map, so we take the conversation from somewhere.
So in that world, you're not using Tutor at all?
We are using Tutor for everything related to creating local environments in our development machines and actually building the images. Then we publish those images to Docker Hub just the way Tutor does. And then when that is done, actually for that, we also build a tool that lets you change Tutor versions really quick. It's called the TVM, and it's public in GitHub as well. So we use Tutor quite a lot, like heavily use Tutor. But what we don't share is the Kubernetes manifest that Tutor provides. Not because it's not a good manifest, it is. It's just because it's not a manifest that matches what we need to do, and it doesn't set up with that code. So we want to add additional space, basically more volumes, or we have a manifest that requires, I don't know, some weird customer wants to have local shared volumes around among the pods or the nodes, and we need to map for that, and Tutor doesn't allow us. And the Tutor response is normally, well, write a plugin. So that's what we did. We wrote a plugin, but not one plugin for the specific, but a plugin for replacing altogether the template that Tutor uses for the manifest, and just writing our own, which is basically big secret here is the same Tutor manifest, but everything is configurable. And then this was my initial attempt. And then Moises took over the library, and he realized that my manifest was actually kind of crappy. So he made a better manifest utilizing layers of customization. And we needed to make that work in a way that both manifests could be used. So that's what we ended up using, like a flexible Tutor plugin for selecting your own your own templates for rendering the final manifest. That's kind of where we ended up with this. And I seriously, I'm not married with the library. We can change it, and my proposal would be that we all take like the same library and probably make it like in the OpenEDX organization and have like proper contributors program for it, and so on and so forth. But in the meantime, my main idea here is that we might be starting in a better spot if we start towards the side that is more geared towards the OpenEDX bits and not towards the infrastructure bits, because that's where we are going to differ the most. Instead, the OpenEDX bits, we can share a lot of what's happening when we're trying to actually host Tutor, host Docker OpenEDX at scale. And that's what no one else is doing. Well, perhaps to you, but they are not sharing what they have.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to hear what you guys think. Like, maybe I'm just completely out of, like, I'm
Well,
thinking.
I run into things that are similar to what you're describing, Felipe. What I faced dual challenges because Kubernetes, I still consider it a new topic for me. I've been working with it full time for about 9 months. You know, it's been a vicious learning curve over a 9-month period, and so I guess my opinion has nuanced over time as I learn more about the topic. And as I have, I've learned, you know, for example, when you get into specifics of the actual manifests that are being produced by Tutor, there's there are interesting capabilities for optimizing Kubernetes, especially if you want to run at a fairly large scale, or if you want to support a lot of customers on a single cluster. There are things that are pretty interesting that have a quite direct bearing on the performance of the software and your cloud bill, and so both of those are really important. And it's only been in the last 6 or 8 weeks that I've even learned about capabilities. And this has to do with internal routing inside of Kubernetes for its internal load balancers, and which pods is it picking out and why, and what can you do as an administrator to affect how those algorithms work. And it's been pretty enlightening to me to learn that you can do a ton. And so on that basis, here's where I think you and I, our roads depart a little bit. I see Tutor as a finished product, and so in my view, it's doing what it was mandated to do, and it does it really well. And so I have zero criticisms, really top to bottom, with Tutor. So, and this has to do with a philosophy. So my philosophy is Tutor produces manifests that get you to a certain state and a certain configuration in the Kubernetes cluster. If there's anything at all about that I'm unsatisfied with, that becomes post-deployment things that I want to work with. And so where it gets tricky is when you have topics like persistent volume claims, and you can't have thrashing situations where Tutor's going to create something and then you have to destroy it and replace it with something, especially once that's gotten backfilled with some data. Then that becomes kind of impossible. But those edge cases aside, it looks to me like what I want to do is have a very thorough understanding at a very granular level of what Tutor deployments look like, so that in any of the deltas, I can do things after it's finished to get to my end result. And to me, that's a permanent solution for me. Like once I've achieved that, I think I'm 100% happy. And I'll also comment that I'm really close to that right now. And so if I can segue a little bit from this, the last time that we met, my single largest complaint the last time that we all got together was the amount of maintenance that was required to keep what I had created, the cookie cutter, which is a Jinja templating tool that makes repositories to do 3 things. Automation to build AWS resources, automation to build Docker containers, and automation to deploy those containers using Tutor onto a Kubernetes cluster. And 2/3 of that was pretty stable, but the part that involved Terraform was just, at the onset, it was kind of a nightmare. And a lot of that also was learning curve on my part. I did a lot of trial and error with different tooling inside of Terraform itself. And some of the stuff that I picked was under rapid development, and the versions were constantly changing, and there were breaking changes. And there was so much of it, and I was learning so much simultaneously that for about 3 months, it was its own full-time job for me from January to March. That was really all I did. That's come and gone, and the tools that I've built have stabilized to the extent that I can build a complete set of horizontally scalable AWS infrastructure, kind of plug and play, and then build containers and deploy those containers, and it's all pretty trouble-free. And I'm not really having to do nearly the kind of maintenance work that I was complaining about the last time that we talked. And so that's changed what I'm trying to get out of these get-togethers a little bit. The tools that I've built work at this stage. I'm satisfied. They work well if you have chosen AWS as your cloud provider, and you're okay with 2 big decisions that are not really flexible. It's Terraform for doing infrastructure management and GitHub Actions for doing build and deployment automation. and so that's kind of what I'm looking for next. Is I have an insatiable appetite for the ability to do this with other cloud providers. Namely GCC and Azure right away, but not limited to those either. And so long term, I'd say I kind of have the features and the functionality that I need to do my job to support my clients, except that I very much dislike being hemmed in to only being able to do that with AWS. And so to the extent that I'm able to collaborate with anyone on this call, with kind of my stated goal of, in the short term, being able to do the same things I can do now, but in Azure, in GCC. If I had that capability by the end of this year, I would be ecstatic. So anyway, that's what I have.
Any other comments? What about the OpenCraft side? Keith, Braden, what do you think?
Yeah, maybe Gabor or Keith, can you talk about the Kubernetes manifests and how we customize them? Has that been an issue for us? I don't even know the answer to that.
Yeah, Keith, would you like to do, or me? What's your preference?
I think let's see your rage. Go ahead.
Okay. Actually, from our side, and as I can see, based on the mirror board, what you sent, Felipe, is that everyone is trying to do the same on the tutor manifest Kubernetes configuration part. If I understand you correctly, we are about in the same shoes. We are trying to customize the Kubernetes resources for our clients, even for our staging infrastructure. We just implemented the horizontal pod auto scaling for pods, which actually requires to rewrite, well, big parts of the default tutor Kubernetes manifest. I don't know if it's the same for you too or not. Maybe it's only us, but that's the case on our side. As we progress to a more mature production version of Grove, it starts to clearly form that the defaults in tutor, at least for Kubernetes, for the other parts, I don't know, because I never used it with other than Kubernetes. But for Kubernetes, the defaults are sensible only for those who are operating just some instances. Let's say 5. But for that, maintaining a Kubernetes cluster just doesn't make sense. So because of that, with the tutor contrib Grove plugin, we actually started, we actually started to, well, redefine most of the resources of tutor, which is not a good situation, but we cannot do better at this point. So yeah, we actually redefining the resources and trying to push politely tutor from Kubernetes point of view in a way which will provide more sensible defaults. I mean, not just for instances or not just for companies which has low number of instances, but for those like us who are running more than 100 instances at the same time. And because of that, it will be great to have defaults, sensible defaults. So yeah, we are at this point right now that we are sharing the same pain as you, but from the infrastructure part, we actually able to deploy to AWS and DigitalOcean, which is great. We have to maintain 2 Terraform scripts, basically two big chunks of that. But for us, that's not a big pain up until now. It's going smoothly. We don't really have problems with that. I was preparing for AWS or DigitalOcean via Brady APIs more times. So far, we encountered only one issue in the past 5 months, and that was related that Kubernetes config exposing is not possible with a provider, which is already working on. So the infrastructure part is good. That's for Lawrence, who is looking forward for more infrastructure. Based on what I can see, but Keith may will say that I'm not completely true. Actually, adding an additional provider wouldn't be that big deal, because the way how Grove is set up is that we are trying to put everything on Kubernetes, what we can, except those resources what would require a lot of maintenance, like the database because of the replication, MongoDB, and so on. So those are managed resources, and everything else, including a monitoring stack, what we set up for the whole Kubernetes cluster, is within the Kubernetes cluster. So it's pretty portable and working smooth. But Keith may
What
want
cloud
to
providers are you running on?
we are running on AWS and DigitalOcean. Yeah, these two.
So you have Terraform scripts that are working with DigitalOcean?
Yes, the infrastructure part and OpenEDX deployments both happening to GitLab pipelines. GitLab pipelines. So everything is automated. It's controlled by commit messages. So, for example, if you would like to remove an instance completely, you just need to delete the folder, push a commit, and even the infrastructure will be applied. So the related database user, database, and so on will be removed. So everything is automated from the infrastructure and from cluster management point of view. We're just struggling a bit with how Tutor defines resources. For example, we bumped into an issue just last week that we wanted to remove the caddy pod, but actually we can't. We wanted to replace it with an Nginx pod, but we can't because Tutor does not give the possibility to remove an already defined resource at the moment.
Okay.
You can override, but actually you can't remove, which is...
Yeah, so you can deploy and... Well, but I mean, that's not the end of the world though, because you can manually delete the deployment, which I have to do that. Here's a tiny nitpick about Tutor is that the pull policy for the key containers, like for Open edX, for me, it would be better if it was pull always, but it's not.
Yeah.
And so there's an example of something where I just kind of go through the entire deployment, and then that becomes a manual edit that I just know that I have to do in order for changes to the build to be pulled in and reflected. It's either that or you delete the deployment manifest entirely, so it just gets replaced and pulled that way. But these, like, to me, these are kind of details. I guess the difference is I'm not supporting 100 instances like what you just commented on. No one client is that large, so my pain is spread out over a dozen different AWS accounts, which I think makes it a lot more manageable, ironically. So for these kinds of things, the nuances, it doesn't really matter to me if Tutor gets it exactly the way I want it or not, like in that case, because I can just take care of it afterwards and it's fine.
We also have a larger team, so we try to avoid, just as a matter of philosophy, we kind of need to avoid anything that requires manual changes after the deployment or stuff like that. Like,
but when I say manual, I don't mean literally going into VI and mucking around with text. Just sidebar comment. Since the last time we talked, I've created this completely separate GitHub organization called Open edX Actions that now has 30 components inside of it. And so that's what I mean in a literal sense is, I'll create a component like that and just tack it on to the bottom of the deployment. And then it does that thing for me. And so since it works and I, like you, I don't want to like literally have to get on my keyboard and do stuff. The deployment needs to be an automated deployment at some definition at 70,000 feet, like at the GitHub Actions workflow level that needs to do everything without my actual human intervention. And so far I've been able to pull that off, and so when there's, whenever there's anything, yeah, when there's things that are not quite the way I want them to be in Tutor, the path of least resistance for me has, like, in 100% of cases, has been to look for some way to solve it, that doesn't involve doing a pull request to Tutor, because that turns into kind of a committee conversation for good reason. Like it should be like that, but I don't want to get into it. Like, I don't want to have a big, long, protracted debate about some techno topic. I'd rather just fix it and move on. And so that's why I now have 30 GitHub Actions components, and this GitHub org, is their workarounds to those kinds of little tiny issues.
That raises the question then, if everyone is unhappy with the Tutor Kubernetes manifests and everyone is creating their own thing.
But I'm not. That's what I'm saying. I'm not unhappy. I'm fine. I'm fine with it.
But you're not using them as is. You're still modifying them, right?
For edge case situations, I think for the bulge bracket use cases, I think it's bullseye. I think Tutor shouldn't be fiddled with. Like the pull policy, that is relevant when the Docker image is in a constant state of change, like when you're working with a developer team and they're rebuilding the image a lot. Then when you redeploy for that new image to make its way into the cluster, like that's when I have to muck around with Kubernetes. And so I had a brief conversation with Regis about that maybe 6 months ago. He had pretty good reason for why I didn't want to change it. And that's pretty consistent. In most cases, when I have something that's particular to me and I bring it up, he's got 6 reasons why it's the way that it is. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And like, I'm the weird guy with the edge case. And so I fix it myself my own way.
Which might be an option, but if I can put that into our perspective, if we have the 100 different customers, each of them requires a different edge case, and none of them is willing to compromise on what Regis says, it would not be ideal for me to go and tell my customer, like, I can't do this because an upstream project that has good reasons for not wanting this doesn't allow me to change it. So
no, I never say no to a customer ever. That's not an option. And that's not what I'm saying. No, I'm just saying that I don't solve the problem with Tutor. I look for a graceful, elegant post-deployment component.
Post-Tutor component. But that is for you one edge case, but I have all edge cases. And that's why I'm looking at Tutor as in, it's good indeed, but then if the manifest is not working for me and it provides a way of adding additional features via plugins, then what I'm doing is adding, or what we are doing is adding a plugin that lets me choose the template of the manifest. It actually lets me choose a bunch of stuff. But the first part, the main stuff, maybe for this discussion, is it lets me have like a library of templates, and I can deploy with the same plugin Tutor 12, 13, 14, or maybe modified Tutor 13 so that it has whatever feature that I need to have, like the pool.
Maybe we should be talking about that. So like my understanding is that our topic of conversation today is a little more centered on kind of build and deploy, which this is in, but this is something very specific that you're bringing up. And I absolutely am seeing good cases. Let me give you a hard example. For the persistent volume store that's created with Mongo. So last time we talked, I was using a remote Mongo. I had tons of problems with it. And I rolled all that back to just using Tutor's deployment of Mongo with the persistent volume store inside of Kubernetes. But you don't really have any control over the characteristics of that persistent volume store. But over time, I've come to realize that you can manipulate the manifest, and you have a ton of fine tuning control over like the specific IOPS that are assigned, to that. Down at the AWS level, when you're creating the volume, there's lots of options available to you for the performance and throughput and resiliency. And I have a lot of interest in being able to get that detailed on that topic. And as Tutor exists, you couldn't do that with Tutor. So maybe we should be creating things like that for Tutor.
Absolutely. You just said you don't have any control over component X. And that for me is the starting point of, then I don't want that solution, because I want to have absolute control over 100% of my components, which doesn't mean that Tutor isn't a great tool. It's just, I kind of I drown in the 20% that Tutor is not catering to. And that's why we needed a Tutor plugin that lets us choose something different.
Every other template in Tutor, it seems like it has a million points of customization. So why do the Kubernetes ones not do that? That seems strange.
I had a conversation about that. The answer for that was the way how Tutor is set up at the moment is not the way how Overhang.io want to have it. For example, the long-term plan, if I understood correctly, is to move the Kubernetes support, Docker Compose support, and every actually platform out of Tutor as a separate plugin, and allow plugins for Tutor in kind of an infinite depth, which for me triggered a yellow flag about how it will be structured in about a year or so. Even if we consider that there are currently 4 solutions that are all modifying the current Kubernetes manifest. Actually, that was the answer, that it will be refactored and moved out from Tutor core as a separate plugin, which could be customized as anyone wants.
That makes a lot of sense. It's consistent with what Regis said in our last phone call. He was pretty explicit, saying that his frontal lobe, all of his energy is focused on single EC2 instance installations of Tutor, kind of using the Tutor Quick Start. And so Braden, another way to answer your question is that that's what Regis has been shooting for, is to provide the broadest possible feature set to that user. And in the same breath, he said, hey, look, like what you guys are doing with Kubernetes is of interest to me personally, but not professionally. Which I think was like the most transparent way to say that we're kind of on our own on these topics. If there's shortcomings to the way manifests work or how much control we have over how they're generated from Tutor, then we kind of need to buck up and contribute to Tutor, to shore that up. Like we're the team that's going to make that happen.
But it has been done, and when you do the pull request to Tutor, he says, and the pull request, like, this is not of interest for me and the 80% of customers, small EC2 instances I want to cater to. So, and then full stop, and then next line says, go build the plugin. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Well, okay, so but hang on, I feel your pain 1,000 times over, and which is why I look for end runs around changing Tutor. But anyway, kind of where we're gravitating towards is that we do need to enhance the feature set for Tutor for advanced Kubernetes administration, and And I'm just going to assert that we're the entire universe of technical expertise on that topic, the guys on this call. And the pain point that you're bringing up, it regards governance of the project. Okay, well, so first of all, I'm the bottom person in the food chain on this call, and so I can help the least on getting attention to pull requests and that kind of thing. But something that probably would be a sensible thing for us to do would be to schedule an organized call like this, specifically with Regis, specifically for this topic, to look at how could we create a core committers program for Tutor that's got a Kubernetes focus. And I would do a couple of things. It would take that load off his shoulders, which I think he would welcome. And then we could just kind of prearrange how to do that so that these efforts can work in parallel and not be in danger of interfering with each other.
I mean, we love Tutor for building images and for DevStacks and all the stuff it does really well.
Mm-hmm.
Do we even need Tutor for the Kubernetes part? Should that just be a separate project? I think that's what Felipe was suggesting. And if it doesn't really take advantage of the rest of the Tutor ecosystem, it doesn't.
If Lawrence said that I was having a pain point with Tutor, and I would rephrase it as, for about 60 to 70% of what Tutor does, I don't have any pain points with it. I absolutely love it.
No, I have a pain point with 30% pull requests.
Yeah. And for the other 30%, I don't use Tutor because that would give me pain points and I don't want them. So I just don't use it for that part. Mm-hmm. And as Brighton just said, what we would strive for is a separate thing to do the manifest and to hold what is collective knowledge in what you just said. This code probably has 95% of all the hosting open edX with Docker knowledge in the world. How do we share that knowledge and collaborate on that knowledge so that whenever one of my customers breaks the, collation on UTF-8 databases, you guys all learn from that and get that for basically for free, just by running the latest version. And same with us, things you will be fine.
Yeah, that's sensible. I think we have a lot of solutions that exist. If we just kind of took a cursory look over in the world of Apache Software Foundation, there's pretty big projects. They're not open edX, but I don't think that matters. There's an awful lot of groups of technical people like us who have that same problem that needs to be solved. Advanced Kubernetes administration and deployment management with multiple cloud providers. And so there's pretty good tool sets we could start with. And then all we got to do is really just bring our open edX expertise and lay it on top of those. And then if in addition, we could cook up a cool way to do this like a pipeline where Tutor stops. So you install some tools side by side with Tutor, and so it does its thing and it builds its file system. If you could read off of that, like in pipeline format, so do your Tutor thing, and then it kicks off this next tool that grabs those as inputs and then builds these manifests that we want at this more granular level with more.
What you just described is the architecture of DryDoc. That is what it's doing. It's just, it has a module for reading the configuration of Tutor from the same config file. And then it just outputs that into a renderer that has different templates. But just as well, it could chain different parts of the pipeline so that
it's called DryDoc.
DryDoc. I'll share the link here in a minute. So the idea is that even when, and again, this library could be destroyed and created in a new format somewhere else, learning from those mistakes. But the idea is that we can share what we can share, and we don't have to compromise on, I cannot do this because OpenCraft doesn't want it, or because the Tutor didn't want it. Then I'll just take like the 99% I want and change the little bit. That's the philosophy behind that.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but actually, it sounds to me, I already raised it up to Keys some months ago, that if we could have something like Helm, do you know Helm libraries? Actually, if you could have something like Helm libraries for tutor, or Helm libraries combined with tutor, or I don't know what would be the best solution or phrasing for that. To me, as I can understand, would solve most of the problems. The library, where you can pick what you want from, if you want it like horizontal pod auto scaling or volume claim specifications or anything similar, but still integrating with tutor, that actually would allow advanced Kubernetes manifest creations, manipulations, especially how Helm charts and Helm libraries are doing that. It has something similar that tutor using with the strategic merge something. So it can merge the keys of the new way with the previous one, or if you don't want to use a resource, you can drop that. So if I understand correctly, that would so if you would have something like that, that would solve the problem for at least OpenCraft, Lawrence, for you, Felipe. So I guess for most of us, who would like to customize the resources in a more advanced manner? But raise your hand if not, or if I misunderstand something.
Right, I do. Yeah, I definitely do.
We already think about a Helm template, but it's a bit of a daunting task to write your own chart, right? It's something that we don't feel comfortable doing by ourselves. So it really to be an option, it has to be like a community effort, because writing
I will say that our team started writing Helm charts for a bunch of other software products that we have, and found the experience quite nice so far. Actually, I thought they would find it really complicated, but they've been very happy with it. And
because of that, I was thinking about the same too. That let's have a Helm chart with Helm libraries combined, which could serve as a base for a community effort, because a library is actually a collection of resources which can be pulled one by one, and the Helm chart could hold these library components together. If someone needs a Helm chart just a bit differently, just for one client, that's still not a big deal. Yeah, but I didn't want to raise it at the first time, and I've seen that Keith is already looked at me about this, because that would mean that actually is dropping a big portion of tutor, or actually refactoring a big portion of tutor, because how the resources are built. But if we could solve to somehow combine Helm libraries and Helm charts with the way tutor is working, actually we could profit from the two worlds: the way how tutor is evolving and how Kubernetes is actually evolving.
I have a question about that, because when we investigated Helm charts internally, this wasn't clear for me. Like, could we reach the point where it's again someone's decision against the other one's decision? So sort of like there will only be one supported library, and one team wants to do things one way and the other one the other way. And that's not for like the one customer, okay, I'll just overwrite that, but just fundamentally changes, and that would mean a split of the project? Or is Helm something that is so customizable and flexible that you could have two competing implementations living in the same repository and being maintained by different teams, at least in part of it? Say half of the deployment is the same for everyone, and half has two different branches or variants that you need to choose. Is that something that's possible in Helm?
It all depends how you write the Helm charts, but it's definitely possible to make them very flexible. You can put like a config extra section in every part of it, and that allows people to add arbitrary YAML into any part of the Kubernetes manifests. And it's very good at merging and has if statements and loops and stuff. So you can create super flexible templates for deployments, and you can decide how much of the best practices you want to encode. If there's really a right way to do one thing, or there's two options and neither are clearly better than the other, you can put both options in, control them by a flag, let people turn on one or the other or neither. It's all just how you write the Helm chart.
That's brilliant. Because what the next step on this same discussion, and it wouldn't be the 4 providers in this call, but it would be if we take lesson from the configuration repo, which had like a bunch of people trying to live in the same repository, and probably that's where the maintaining policy of whatever library Helm charts or other thing that we end up writing together would come into effect. Like, how do we manage to make sure that every file or every like option has an owner, and that is not like what ended up happening with edX often enough, that was, I don't know, like you can change that, but we don't use that, so we don't really know if you're breaking someone else's deployment, and then things never got merged, or indeed got merged but broke everyone's deployment. So
well, I will say that Helm is used to deploy anything on Kubernetes. You want to deploy MySQL, you've got a Helm chart. You want to deploy Redis, you've got a Helm chart. And those are examples of things that have a million different ways to configure them along with best practices. And if you look at the Helm charts for, say, Redis, you'll see it has
like a million configurations.
Well, it also has high-level options. It's like, do you want cluster mode or do you want a single instance? And that's one setting, and then it will automatically choose the best defaults, but you can override them all. So I'd say it's already used for similar use cases.
Helm and Kubernetes are governed by the same single organization. And
you
my
mean
understanding
CNCF?
I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but
Cloud Native Computing Foundation,
yes,
which is part of the Linux Foundation.
Yes, that. I only know this. I'm taking the Kubernetes class on edX right now, and that was like in the introduction, and I didn't know, so I'm sharing that with everyone else. That Helm and Kubernetes are kind of like two arms connected to the same body, and that was new for me.
Actually, CNCF structure is a bit different what it looks like from outside. Actually, it's a foundation that collects projects, and it has an incubator which grows the project, and it has a full life cycle for that. The projects are in the same hand from legal point of view, but they could be absolutely separate projects, but they have to meet the same requirements from the CNCF Foundation, which is actually great. Circling back to Felipe's question, actually
sorry, Gabor, sorry to interrupt a little bit, because we just have 5 minutes left, and because the last conversation there was a long drought after that, I'd like to make sure we have like some action items after that, so that we can have something concrete maybe. So I mean, I've heard a lot of things. Do we see anything concrete that we would agree on? And because we are probably not going to be deciding everything in the last 5 minutes, what would be a good way to advance of that? Like, is there someone who would want to propose something formally, or even different proposals, and then we pick from them? What do people think about how to decide?
I would love if everyone could think about how interested they would be in collaborating on Helm charts for deploying OpenEdX on a cluster. And if so, what are the pitfalls they're worried about? Like Felipe brought up analogies to the configuration repo. What can we learn from that to avoid it, to avoid those downsides if we go with that approach? That would be my request.
Maybe
second
think
that.
about maybe think about if we are going to drop tutor as a Kubernetes interface altogether, and use it only as the Docker image that it provides. Like we don't really deploy with tutor KAS quick start, we try to use GitHubs. So drop tutor KS.
You're muted, Sergey, if you would.
Thank you. Yeah, on the two topics that have been mentioned, would you be willing to write down a formal proposal that we could, so that like review and try to submit? Brayden, you were the one suggesting not to put you on the spot, but
I mean, I could, yeah. I would want to hear that people are on board with the plan first, or do you want to read the proposal first? Which is the chicken?
Before,
and which is the egg?
I think I'd be happy to jump on that proposal, but Helm charts is something that I'm not so familiar with. So I propose that you give us, or maybe me, some time to think about it, like maybe 1 or 2 weeks. I'll schedule it for this same sprint, and I'll come up with a plan of how willing is the next team to write what we have in store and what we would need from a Helm chart library. And if so, we can perhaps even collaborate on writing the proposal and make just the one proposal that comes from both.
That would be even better, yeah. And also, if you can share your thoughts that you were saying about what went wrong with the configuration repo and how we can do better if we're doing a shared thing that's somewhat analogous to it, that would be very helpful.
Sure. Do you think this is probably proposal doesn't require yet that we think of a web and all that formality, right? It's just a document.
We might go there eventually, but for now we can just do just a simple proposal, just so everyone can see what we're talking about.
Okay. Okay, then I'll schedule myself for investigating Helm charts, which Moises might be able to help me with.
Felipe, would you like me to send you example with the Helm libraries and how Helm charts could use that? Because as Brayden mentioned, we already experienced with that. We had actually a pretty good experience putting the Helm library and Helm chart together. I'm pretty happy to send it over to you. Maybe it helps you to check it.
Sure, please send along. That's part of the investigation.
great. So as action item, maybe Felipe, when you you can maybe post like the outcome of your exploration. Maybe Gabor, if you can post that in the public thread, this way other people who want to have a look, they can maybe have a look. And once you've posted that, Felipe, then you work together on a proposal.
Okay, I'll try to summarize that, and probably when you read that, Brayden, you will know how similar or not are we understanding this.
Perfect.
Okay.
This is great. Cool.
Maybe the
All right,
last
thanks
topic
everyone.
Yep.
No, I just wanted to say that maybe the last topic that we didn't reach a conclusion is we are all fine with our own solutions for infrastructure, right? So no more discussion around that, right?
It's an open question still. Like there are still opportunities to collaborate on infrastructure.
I remain interested in being able to do what I do in AWS on other cloud providers. And that's a pretty high priority for me.
And maybe we can split that topic for a different discussion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think what we're talking about currently is more immediately important for the group and maybe me also.
Yeah, already being able to do that would be a good first step. I think if we try to do too much at the same time, it will be more difficult. All right, any final words?
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Thank you. Have a nice week.
Bye.